The morning began with Amara standing at the kitchen sink, staring at the electricity bill like it was a bad prophecy. It had doubled again. No warning, no explanation, just another reminder that Lagos never waited for anyone to breathe. Behind her, Kunle paced the living room, one hand on his forehead, the other holding a calculator that kept giving him numbers he didn't want to see. They used to laugh easily, back when their marriage felt like soft bread and harmless arguments about who cooked better jollof. But now, even silence carried weight. Kunle hated how failure sat on his shoulders, hated how the world demanded strength from him while giving him nothing to stand on. Amara could see him shrinking, not because he didn't love her, but because life was forcing him into corners that didn't have doors. She wanted to hold him, to remind him that they were still a team, but she also felt the quiet ache of exhaustion. Love didn't stretch as far as bills did. Later that evening, as the street light flickered outside their apartment in Aja, Amara sat beside Kunle on their sagging couch. Between them lay a pile of unpaid rent notice and reminder from Kunle's failed logistic client. "We'll be fine," he whispered, but even his voice sounded tired of saying it. Amara nodded because disagreeing would make him feel worse, but her heart trembled at the uncertainty. They had promised each other life built on shared dreams. Now they were sharing anxiety, debt, and a silence thick enough to swallow hope. Still, she held his hand, because if marriage meant anything, it meant staying when staying was hard. What she didn't know was that somewhere miles away, a woman with red lipstick and too much power was already dialing Kunle's number. Help was coming, but not the kind that saved marriages. Kunle's phone buzzed while him and Amara were eating yam and egg. The name flashing on the screen made his shoulders painful and stiffened. Madam B. He quickly excused himself and stepped out of the balcony, lowering his voice, but not low enough for Amara not to miss the sweetness that slipped into his tone. Amara kept eating, slow and steady, pretending not to hear anything, but she knew that voice. She knew that gentleness wasn't meant for her, not anymore. When Kunle returned, his smile was too bright, too practiced. "She just wants to check on the business," he said casually, but the light floated between them like perfume, beautiful, expensive, and suffocating. Amara didn't argue. She simply collected the plates, washed them quietly, and tried not to wonder why help had to sound like temptation. Later that night, Kunle showed Amara screenshots of transfer from Madam Beatrice Okonkwo. Money for rent, money for capital, money for maintenance. Amara tried to smile, tried to be graceful, but the amounts were too large to be kindness. They had strings, strings that wrapped around her marriage every time Kunle's phone buzzed. "She's just a sponsor," Kunle insisted, but his eyes didn't match his words. Amara knew better. Lagos sponsors came with rules, expectations, and ownership disguised as generosity. Still, she swallowed her discomfort, telling herself that they just needed help to stand again. But when Beatrice sent a voice note saying she was planning a trip back to Lagos to see her darling, Amara felt her stomach twist. Sponsors didn't visit, they inspected. Kunle finally confessed one night after Beatrice sent him a designer wristwatch and a message that ended with, "Can't wait to see you soon." Amara felt her chest tightening. She sat beside him on the bed, waiting for the truth, like someone waiting for a wound to sting. Kunle admitted that Beatrice believed he was single or available, as he phrased it. Was good because she liked him, because he was desperate. Amara's eyes stung, not from betrayal alone, but from the realization that she had participated in a survival story without knowing its true cost. She wanted to scream, but poverty muffled her voice. Instead, she whispered, "What happens when she comes?" Kunle couldn't answer. Their argument stretched for hours. Amara asking why love had to bleed for bills. Kunle insisted he had no choice. She reminded him that dignity mattered. He reminded her that eviction notice didn't care about dignity. They sat on opposite ends of the room, two lovers, turned strangers by fear. Finally, Amara whispered the words she hated. Let's just stabilize first. Then we cut her off. Kunle nodded, relief washing off over his face. But Amara's heart felt hollow. She knew they had crossed a line, one that money could erase, but their soul couldn't forget. And the line was getting closer with every message Beatrice sent. When Beatrice confirmed her arrival date, everything in the house changed. Kunle suddenly cared about curtains, couches, wall paint, and scented candles. He moved like a man preparing for an inspection, not a guest. He hired painters, brought throw pillows, rearranged furniture, and even replaced the fridge. Amara watched silently, folding laundry in the corner like an accessory rather than a wife. Each improvement felt like a rehearsal, like the house was being prepared for another woman's approval. Collins didn't ask for her opinion. He treated her like part of the background, necessary but not visible. It was the first time Amara felt like she was losing space in her home. At night, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling as Kunle whispered into his phone on the balcony. He was practicing lies, telling Beatrice he lived alone, telling her the house would be perfect for her stay. Amara wrapped her hands around herself, trying to stay warm despite the chill inside her chest. She remembers their early marriage, Kunle's laughter, his soft touch, the way he once bragged about her cooking to his friends. Now she was invisible, a silent witness to performance she never auditioned for. She sensed something heavy building in the air, a storm shaping like perfume and money. Kunle broke the news on a Tuesday morning while Amara was ironing his shirt. He didn't sit down, didn't soften in his voice. He just dropped the words like stone inside water. Amara, I need you to pretend to be the house girl. The iron froze in her hand. She turned slowly, sure she had heard wrong. But Kunle continued, rushing through explanation. Beatrice must not know he is married. She must believe he lives alone. The sponsorship depends on it. Amara felt her throat close. So I'm your wife only when nobody is watching. She whispered. Kunle looked away. His silence was confirmation. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from anger alone, but from heartbreak. She had followed this man through storms. How did he become a perp in her survival plan? Kunle tried to justify it. It's just for a few days, a week at most. If she finds out, we lose everything. Amara wanted to scream that she was everything. Instead, she folded the shirt, placed it on the table, and walked to their room. She didn't slam the door. She didn't shout. She simply sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slowly, realizing for the first time that love can drain when too much fear is poured into it. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. And in marriages like theirs, silence could be mistaken for agreement. Amara stood beside the mirror, wearing the brown oversized housegirl uniform Kunle bought from the market. It was stiff, itchy, and too plain for a woman who once wore bright Ankara dresses with pride. Kunle stood behind her, giving instructions like a manager training a new staff member. Don't speak unless she asks you something, he said. Don't look her directly in the eyes. Walk slowly, no makeup, and your name is now Ngozi. Each row felt like a blade, carving pieces out of her identity. Amara nodded. Even though her throat felt too tight to swallow, she had never felt so small. Practicing how to lower her gaze made her realize how easy it was for dignity to slip away when survival demanded silence. For the rest of the day, Kunle coached her on how to move around the house without drawing attention. You are supposed to bend into the background. He repeated. The absurdity of it bruised her. She was learning how to disappear inside her own home, learning how to dim her light so another woman could shine in a place she built with love. She swept floors she had swept 1,000 times, but now she did it with posture of someone who didn't belong. She said Kunle water, and he barely looked at her, as if embracing the lie early would help him serve what was coming. Amara felt something shift inside her, a quiet breaking that didn't make noise but left cracks everywhere. Beatrice arrived in a fury of perfume, gold jewelry, and expensive confidence. She swept into the house like she owned it, pulling Kule into a long, unnecessary embrace that made Amara's tummy turn. As Amara lowered her eyes and greeted her as trained, Beatrice barely glazed her way until she did. You, dear girl, why is the floor looking dusty? Her voice cut through the room like a whip. Amara froze for a second too long, and Beatrice narrowed her eyes. She snapped her fingers, ordering Amara to kneel and wipe the already clean towels in front of her. Kunle said nothing. Amara felt a heat race to her face, a shame so sharp in it made her vision blurry, but she knelt slowly, wiping imaginary dust as Beatrice watched with satisfaction. Humiliation deepened when Beatrice asked for water and intentionally spilled some on the floor, claiming Amara hadn't served it well. Amara knew the woman was testing her patience, trying to establish dominance. As she bent to clean the spill, Beatrice leaned towards Kule and whispered loudly, Your house girl is too slow. Maybe you need a firmer hand. Kule laughed weakly, the sound betraying his fear more than loyalty. That was the moment something hardened inside Amara, a decision formed without words. She would endure this performance, but she would not lose herself. This humiliation would be a seed, and one day she would choose what grew from it. I will not die inside this marriage, she told herself silently, wiping the floor with steady hands. By the second day, Beatrice began noticing things she didn't like. Things that didn't fit the story Kunle told her. She watched Amara's posture, her graceful way of arranging plates, the educated tone that slipped into her speech when she forgot to act. She noticed a faint thin line on Amara's finger where wedding ring once sat. Where exactly are you from? Beatrice asked one afternoon, pretending to be casual. Amara kept her eyes down and murmuring the fake village name Kunle had drilled into her. From Beatrice's gaze lingered, she wasn't convinced. Kunle grew increasingly paranoid. Every time Beatrice asked a casual question, he corrected Amara afterwards like a teacher scolding a careless student. You are too confident, he whispered angrily. You are going to ruin everything. His tone was sharper, colder. Fear had made him unkind. Meanwhile, Beatrice started doing small tests, leaving money lying around, calling Amara suddenly to observe her reaction, even asking her to read labels from a distance to see if she was educated. The house felt like a trap, each room filled with invisible cameras. Amara realized the lie wasn't just dangerous, it was beginning to rot everything it touched. Amara met Efe at a small buka near Lekki, far from Beatrice's eyes. She told her everything, every rule, every humiliation, every moment Kunle treated her like a stranger. Ife's expression darkened with each word. This isn't survival, Amara. This is madness, she said, slamming her spoon down. You are letting a stranger sit in your marriage and tell you who you are? Amara felt tears sting her eyes, but Ife held her hands firmly. Love is not a reason to disappear. If he loved you, he wouldn't ask you to shrink for another woman. Her words felt deep, opened wounds Amara had tried to ignore. Ife insisted Amara start documenting everything, messages, money transfer, conversation. You need evidence, she said. People like Madam B don't just live quietly, and people like Kunle are dangerous when cornered. Amara hated hearing her husband described that way, but she couldn't deny the truth in her friend's voice. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she had been carrying the marriage alone. As they parted, Ife hugged her tightly. Choose yourself before no one remembers you exist. It was the first time Amara truly understood she wasn't just losing dignity, she was losing herself. With each passing day, Beatrice's confidence grew. She walked through the house issuing instructions as though she owned everything in it, including Kunle. She created new routines: breakfast at 8 sharp, lunch precisely at 1, her clothes arranged by color, her shoes polished daily. But the worst part was how she subtly positioned herself as the woman of the house. She sat in Amara's favorite chair, used her apron while cooking, and even placed framed picture of herself in the living room, claiming the space as hers, though small, calculated intrusions. Beatrice dangled opportunities in front of Kunle: a bigger investment, a chance to manage one of her companies, an international travel offer, but each promise came with invisible chains: late night conversations, long private walks, more time spent alone with her. Kunle, desperate for financial rescue, complied, and Amara watched with glowing clarity. Beatrice wasn't helping them, she was buying them. Every compliment she gave Kunle was a hook. Every instruction she gave Amara was a reminder of her place in the hierarchy she had built. The house was no longer a home. It was a stage where Amara played the smallest role in a story she never agreed to. The lie nearly unraveled on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. One of Kunle's cousins, Dele, unexpectedly dropped by to return a borrowed toolbox. He walked into the living room just as Amara was arranging the throw pillow Beatrice had bought. Dele greeted her warmly. "Ha, Amara, long time," forgetting entirely that she was supposed to be Ngozi, the house girl. The room froze. Beatrice's head snapped towards Kunle, her eyes snapped and sharp with suspicion. Kunle stepped forward so fast he nearly tripped, laughing awkwardly as he claimed Dele had mistaken her for someone else. But Dele, confused, kept insisting he knew her. Amara's heart pounded so loudly she felt it in her ears. She lowered her gaze and muttered a practiced apology, hoping her quietness would smear enough doubt to save them. Beatrice's expression softened, only slightly, but the seed of distrust had been planted. When Dele finally left, Kunle dragged Amara into their bedroom and shut the door so loud that walls trembled. "Are you trying to ruin me?" he hissed, pacing like a man on fire. Amara blinked in disbelief. She had done nothing wrong. "I didn't call him here," she whispered, but Kunle didn't care for explanation. Fear had turned him into something else. Sharp, bitter, reckless. He blamed her for standing too confidently, speaking too clearly, even breathing too loudly. His voice cracked into panic as he warned her that if the truth came out, everything they had built would collapse. Amara listened silently, the walls sliding deeper than she expected. It became clear Kule no longer saw her as his partner. She was part of the problem he was trying to manage. That night, she cried quietly into her pillow, realizing her marriage was cracking just as dangerously as the lie they were both trapped in. Ife introduced Amara to Barrister Tunde Salako in a quiet cafe in Yaba. He had calm eyes and gentle voice, nothing like the aggressive lawyers Amaya imagined. She sat across from him, twisting her hands nervously as she explained the situation from the beginning: the sponsorship, the arrangement, the humiliation, the danger of the truth coming out. Barrister Salako listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned forward and spoke with steady clarity. "Amara, you need to protect yourself, not from Beatrice alone, but from the collapse this lie would cause." His words weren't judgmental, they were grounding. He explained her legal rights, what evidence she should keep, what to do if Kunle's desperation escalated. For the first time in weeks, Amara felt a small ember of control return to her chest. Leaving the calf, Amara walked slowly towards the bus stop, breathing in the evening air as though learning to breathe again. She replaced Alako's words in her head. Survival does not mean diminishing yourself. It struck her deeply. She had been shrinking, bending, breaking just to hold her marriage together. But doing so, she had betrayed herself. That night, she created a folder in her phone titled Proof. Screenshots, messages, voice notes, transaction alerts, not for revenge, but for safety. She also withdrew a small portion of money from the joint account and kept it hidden just in case. As she folded the uniform before the bed, something inside her settled. She would play her role, but she would no longer be helpless. She was preparing for whatever storm would, fi- would finally hit. Beatrice decided to host a high society dinner, a gathering of business associates, old friends, and people who adored her carefully curated image. She ordered new glassware, hired additional staff, and wore a gown so extravagant it made the chandelier look dim. Throughout the evening, she backed others at Amara, using her as an example of obedient help. Kone laughed along nervously, playing the grateful potage. But the tension in the room shifted when Beatrice called Amara forward in front of everyone. She handed Amara a complicated wine opener and, with a smirk, asked her to demonstrate how to use it. It was a deliberate trap, one no ordinary house girl would know. Amara froze as everyone watched her, the air thick with anticipation. Kunle saw the panic in Amara's eyes, but instead of stepping in, he waited, hoping she wouldn't break the illusion. Beatrice folded her hand, waiting for the light to crumble publicly. Amara's hand trembled, her mind racing, until she finally whispered that she didn't know how. Beatrice clicked her tongue loudly. You see, Kunle, this is why you shouldn't hire girls with no training. The guest chuckled politely. Amara felt her face burn, humiliation soaking through her bones. But something else happened too. She saw Kunle watching her, not with love or concern, but with irritation. In that moment, something snapped inside her. This wasn't a marriage, this was performance, and she was the sacrifice. As she retreated to the kitchen, she knew the night had changed something permanently. The truth didn't come out in a dramatic confession or a slip of tongue. It broke free through a single photograph. One of Beatrice's guests uploaded a picture from the dinner, an innocent group photo taken in the living room. But in the background, barely visible, was a framed wedding picture of Amara and Kunle that had been forgotten to hide. Betty saw it the next morning. She didn't scream. She didn't ask questions. She simply walked into the living room where Kunle and Amara were, placed her phone on the table, and pressed play on a recording of her own laughter, cold, sharp, terrifying, then showed Kunle the picture. How so this is the house girl, she said quietly. Her silence was more dangerous than shouting. Kunle dropped to his knees, stuttering excuses. Amara stood still, tummy twisting, knowing the storm they feared had finally arrived. Beatrice paced slowly, like a queen, inspecting traitors. I fed you. I clothed you. I built you, she said to Kunle, and you repay me with lies? Her eyes shifted to Amara. And you sat in my presence, pretending to scrub grounds. Amara opened her mouth, but no words came out. Beatrice's range exploded, not in violence, but in words sharp enough to wound. She pulled all her support instantly. Transactions reversed, promises cancelled, opportunities withdrawn. Kunle's entire world collapsed in seconds, and for the first time, he looked at Amara with fear, realizing he had dragged her into a disaster he couldn't fix. Kunle followed Amara around the house for days, begging for forgiveness, blaming fear, blaming poverty, blaming everyone but himself. But Amara had changed. Something had settled inside her. Something strong, something tired, something done. She packed her clothes slowly, folding each piece with calmness of someone no longer fighting. When Kule grabbed her hands desperately, saying, "We can rebuild, we can start again," she looked at him with eyes that no longer held the girl who used to hope for miracles. "You didn't need me as a wife," she said softly. "You needed me as a shield, and I am done being your cover." Beatrice tried to reclaim the narrative too, calling Amara to threats, insults, and intimidation. But none of it reached her the way it once would have. Strength had replaced fear. Amara moved out quietly, staying with Ife for a while as she consulted Barrister Sulaku again to understand her options. The story didn't end with sudden revenge or immediate healing, but with a woman choosing herself for the first time in years. Kunle stood alone in the echo of his life he had destroyed, realizing too late that no amount of sponsorship could replace the dignity he traded away. And as Amara stepped into the sunlight outside Ife's apartment, she whispered the words that would define her new beginning. "I am no longer anyone's house girl. I am mine."